Welcome to Capital Catch-Up, your guide to the inner workings of Congress. I am Victor.
And I am Lenny. Today, we are breaking down a massive slate of legislative action, starting with how the government is planning to avoid a shutdown. Victor, tell us about House Bill 6500.
That is the Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act, 2027. It is a stopgap funding measure, meaning it temporarily funds the federal government at fiscal year 2026 levels through December 11, 2026. This gives lawmakers more time to negotiate permanent appropriations. It ensures essential projects, agency activities, and mandatory payments keep running. Specifically, it targets surface transportation, Department of Veterans Affairs programs, and financial adjustments for defense shipbuilding, national security systems, and agricultural and census-related operations.
This stopgap is crucial, especially given the friction we are seeing over the economy. In the Senate proceedings from August 7, 2026, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer criticized the Trump administration's economic performance, citing a recent jobs report showing significant losses and arguing that trade and tariff policies are hurting working families.
While there is partisan friction over the domestic economy, we see real bipartisan consensus on foreign policy. The Senate is pushing forward with House Bill 5334, the Lindsey O Sanctioning Russia and Iran Act of 2026. This bill proposes a major expansion of U.S. sanctions against Russia and extends existing sanctions against Iran. It mandates strict penalties like blocking property, banning energy sector investments, restricting the purchase of Russian sovereign debt, and banning uranium imports. It also targets Russian officials, oligarchs, and foreign entities that facilitate sanctions evasion.
Interestingly, the bill authorizes the president to impose duties on countries purchasing Russian crude oil or natural gas. During the August 7th debate, senators successfully secured commitments to ensure these tariff powers remain transparent and focused on national security rather than domestic economic strain.
On a related note, the Senate is also considering Senate Bill 4379, the Russia's War on Faith Act. This targets the systematic persecution of religious groups in Russian-occupied Ukraine, where authorities have reportedly detained, tortured, and killed clergy and seized houses of worship. It requires the Secretaries of State and Defense to submit annual reports on these abuses and directs the President to impose sanctions on those responsible, using tools like the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act.
Let us shift to healthcare, which directly impacts everyday Americans. First up is Senate Bill 4189, the Insulin Act of 2026. This bipartisan bill caps patient cost sharing for insulin at $35 per 30-day supply for group health plans and insurance issuers, while banning deductibles. It also reforms pharmacy benefit manager practices by requiring that 100% of rebates and fees be passed through to health plans, speeds up generic and biosimilar drug approvals, and establishes an uninsured pilot program.
Another significant health bill is Senate Bill 3267, the ASAP Act. This would expand Medicare coverage to include blood-based screening tests for the early detection of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. Starting in 2028, it would integrate FDA-cleared diagnostic tools like genomic sequencing and advanced biospecimen analyses into Medicare.
To help address physician shortages in rural and underserved areas, Senate Bill 3038, the Healthcare Workforce Real-Time Data Dashboard Act, proposes a centralized real-time data dashboard. It would track graduate medical education residency positions, application trends, and geographic distribution, with $1.5 million authorized for fiscal year 2026.
We also have several bills focusing on tribal health and land rights. Senate Bill 1055, the Indian Health Service Emergency Claims Parity Act, simplifies emergency medical care coverage outside the Indian Health Service system by establishing a standardized 15-day window for notifying the service of emergency treatment.
To protect tribal patients from out-of-pocket costs, Senate Bill 699, the Purchased and Referred Care Improvement Act of 2025, mandates that patients are not financially responsible for medical services authorized by the Indian Health Service, regardless of any prior agreement signed. It also requires the Secretary of Health and Human Services to set up a timely reimbursement process for patients who pay out of pocket.
To address healthcare staffing shortages on tribal lands, House Bill 3670, the IHS Provider Expansion Act, proposes establishing an Office of Graduate Medical Education Programs within the Indian Health Service. This office would oversee residency and fellowship pipelines, coordinate with academic institutions, and work with an interagency working group, including the Department of Veterans Affairs, with $4 million authorized annually starting in fiscal year 2027.
On the tribal land front, House Bill 3620 and Senate Bill 2098, both known as the South Central Foundation Land Transfer Act of 2025, require the Secretary of Health and Human Services to convey about 3.372 acres of federal property in Anchorage, Alaska, to the South Central Foundation via warranty deed within 2 years. This supports the Foundation's health and social programs, removes federal reversionary interest, and protects the Foundation from liability for pre-existing environmental contamination.
We also have House Bill 2916, which ratifies a settlement resolving long-standing land claims for the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe in New York. This involves the tribe, New York State, local counties, and the New York Power Authority, authorizing land transfers and designating specific lands as Indian country for tribal jurisdiction.
In Michigan, House Bill 411, the Keweenaw Bay Indian Community Land Claim Settlement Act of 2025, addresses a historic injustice. Between 1850 and 1937, the federal government improperly transferred over 4,000 acres of reservation land, violating 1854 treaty rights. This bill proposes a $33.9 million settlement to compensate the community and clear land titles for current non-tribal landowners, with a strict ban on using these funds for gaming.
Finally, Senate Bill 719, the Tribal Forest Protection Act Amendments Act of 2025, expands the 2004 Act to include lands held by Alaska Native corporations, authorizing $15 million annually from fiscal years 2026 through 2031 for ecosystem protection and restoration.
Moving to government integrity, Senate Bill 5223, the No-Profit Act, was introduced on August 3, 2026. It aims to prevent insider trading and market manipulation by making it unlawful to trade securities or commodities using non-public information gained through prioritized access to government-controlled social media accounts. It also bans social media platforms from selling or providing this prioritized access, imposing civil penalties for violations.
Let us turn to executive and judicial nominations. The Senate is currently deliberating on the nomination of Todd Blanche for Attorney General, weighing his qualifications, past judgment, and the need for institutional independence within the Department of Justice.
There is a long list of other key nominations. Charlton Allen is nominated to be General Counsel of the Federal Labor Relations Authority for 5 years. For diplomatic roles, Michael Kavukian is nominated to be Ambassador to Norway, John Breslow to be Ambassador to Cyprus, and Adam Cassidy to be Ambassador-at-Large for Cyberspace and Digital Policy.
For department leadership, Michael Vance is nominated as Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research. Edward Epler is nominated as Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Transportation. Sriprakash Kothari is nominated as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. Glenn Smith is nominated as Undersecretary of Agriculture for Rural Development. Kevin Lilly is nominated as Assistant Secretary for Fish and Wildlife. And William Hague is nominated as Assistant Secretary of the Interior.
Finally, Sharon E. Goody and Christopher Michael DeBono are nominated to be Associate Judges of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia for 15-year terms. Frank Garcia is nominated to the Board of Directors of the African Development Foundation. Michael McDonald is nominated as Chairperson of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and Karen Sessions is nominated as a Commissioner of the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
As we close out, what should our listeners watch out for next, Lini?
Keep an eye on the December 11, 2026 deadline for the Stopgap funding under House Bill 6500. Also, watch for progress on the Insulin Act, the Russia and Iran Sanctions Bill, and the confirmation hearings for Todd Blanche and the other key executive and judicial nominees.
That is all for today's Capital Catch-Up. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.